to the 6th Marie Curie Alumni Association Annual Conference at this historical building of University of Vienna. My name is Mostafa, and I would be the moderator of this session today. So may I introduce the guest of our opening ceremony, Matthew DiFranco, the chair of Marie Curie Alumni Association, Barbara Weitgruber, Director General for Austrian Federal Ministry of Research, Education, and Science. And then we have a very special guest, our first keynote speaker of this event, Mrs. Themis Christophidou. She is the Director General for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture from European Commission. So thank you for joining with us today. Research and innovation beyond information age. That's the theme of our this year's conference. So what's beyond the information age? Will it be like sci-fi movies, what we see? Or will it be like a world without hunger, war? Or we should take a preparation for AI taking over like Terminator? Should we be excited or worried? I believe we can take away from what Marie Curie once said, nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now it is the time to understand more so that we can fear less. This notion of not being afraid to embark into the unknown for a greater purpose was true then, and it is true now. Marie Curie also said, be less curious about people and more curious about ideas. Because ideas can change the world. But to create ideas, we need to create a culture which can innovate ideas and value the ideas through human interaction, debate, and discussion. And that is one of the reasons here we are today. But as an individual, how do we actually promote this culture of progress? Because as you know, Marie Curie was taught on early on, the progress is neither easy nor swift. Despite that, look what she achieved in her life. So there will be always barriers. There will be always issues which will hinder us as a scientific society to progress. But we need to have opportunities. We need to, in order to mitigate these things, we must have ideas which can innovate the solutions. We must need to believe in science, because science gives us hope to dream, and also hope to change. So we need to have opportunities for that. And MCAA as an organization is here to provide these opportunities. That is why we actively work on career development, science policy, and innovation, among other personal or societal causes. Also, in order to do that, we also must have perseverance. We should never be fearful for what we are doing when it is right. That is why we work on policy, gender issues. We work on researchers who are differently abled. So at this moment, I'd like to thank you all for joining here today. A big shout out for every one of you, because you have decided to join the discussions which will help to improve our future tomorrow. So, without a further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Matthew DiFranco, the chair of MCAA.
So thank you, Mostafa, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. Welcome to Vienna. Welcome to the Marie Curie Alumni Association Annual Conference. I think before I say anything more, I just want to say thank you to Mostafa, and thank you to the rest of the board and the members of MCAA for actually organizing this event and making this happen. We had the vision to host this conference in Vienna 2 years ago within the Austrian chapter, and we are very happy to see today, after 2 years of work and planning, so many people here. So many people who are members, but also people from the public, researchers, people who are interested, our sponsors, our speakers, our keynotes, and our invited guests. And thank you again, everybody, for all your efforts. So I think because we're not just a closed group from MCAA, I'd like to talk very briefly about what is MCAA, who we are. So the Alumni Association was actually founded in 2012 from Odysseus Panopoulos, from the European Commission, with support from Mike Rogers, also from the European Commission, as a way to connect researchers who were funded through the Marie Curie Skłodowska actions, and to understand better how the people who have been funded for these mobility grants actually proceed with their careers and what the impact is of this funding scheme. So, and as Mostafa said, the organization is actually supported through the Director General of the European Commission for Education, Sport, Youth and Culture. So we were founded as a network of researchers and as a community, and we've actually grown that way. As of now, we have over 13,000 members, and we have the potential, based on our membership requirement of being funded through the MSCA program, of over 100,000 members. And so this is extremely exciting in terms of building a global community of researchers. So a bit about myself. I would say in some ways embody researcher mobility. I grew up in the US. I'm from New Jersey. I studied in Philadelphia. I studied engineering. And then I decided to move to London to do a master's degree. And so from that point on, what I thought would be a one-year experience overseas has actually become a 15-year experience overseas. And it took me to London, to Dublin, and then eventually to Austria, first to Innsbruck, and then to Vienna. And I came here to Vienna to do a Marie Curie Individual Fellowship. And my background in research is in medical imaging and computer science, so nothing that necessarily prepared me to be involved in an organization like MCAA, but it's still something that I do that I'm passionate about. So within the MCAA, my interest and my desire to actually work within this organization really stems from my first contact with MCAA. I was just finishing my fellowship here in Austria, in Vienna. I was looking for my next position to promote my own academic career, but I wanted to stay here. And I was at the first meeting of the Austrian chapter of MCAA, and I realized right away that the people there was only 9 of us, I think, were all connected by the idea that we are interested in research. We're not necessarily living in our own country, we're mobile researchers, or we had just come, there were some people who came back to Austria, but we're also feeling a bit like thinking about what do I do next with my career, what do I do as a researcher? So from that point, I stayed involved with the Austrian chapter and then the board of MCAA, and I think for me it's important that our organization continues to provide this feeling for our members and also for people outside of our membership, that we are a community, that research is a passion for many people, it's a profession for many people, and it's something that we can do throughout our lives. And in doing that, we have the ability to connect one another and connect with our society, whether it's locally, nationally, or globally, and that we support each other in our careers, not just support in terms of what we're doing in the lab or what the next paper is we're working on, but support each other in our lives. We really are building a family here. And that we advocate. The MCAA is very actively engaged in advocating for researcher careers, advocating for knowledge in society, and advocating for an improvement in the life and the culture for everybody. And finally, to educate. As researchers, we all have somewhat of a responsibility, but also oftentimes a desire to educate. We might teach, we might mentor, we might supervise. But I think these values, these things, we as an organization can do. And I hope that you have the opportunity to experience these aspects of MCAA throughout the 2 days here. And I just want to say thank you once more for coming and enjoy your experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for your nice introduction. The next speaker will be Barbara Weitgruber. She is the Director General for Scientific Research and International Relations of Austrian Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research. She was also a founding staff member and director of the Office of International Relations and lecturer at the University of Graz. So,
Dear Director General, dear President, dear Vice President, dear board members of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Alumni Association, it's a pleasure and honor for me to welcome you on behalf of the Austrian Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research. And it is actually, within a few months, the second large conference related to Marie Skłodowska-Curie, as Austria was the chair of the European Union Council for the second half of last year. And we had the honor and the pleasure to host a large EU presidency conference on the further development of Marie Skłodowska-Curie. And actually, also at that point, it was very important for us to hear the voice of the alumni. The Austrian Ministry of Education, Science and Research is trying to foster and enhance attractive career opportunities, and we do so within performance agreements, 3-year performance agreements with our public university, as well as the Austrian Academy of Sciences and the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria, not just for our national researchers, but for the international researchers, as well as research, and we have heard that before, is not bound to any national boundaries. When seeing the program of the conference, I was quite impressed about the diversity of the panels and sessions offered. And I think that this also reflects well the reality, the everyday reality of researchers, and especially young researchers at different stages in their career. Mental health of researchers and team leaders, branding yourself. This is probably something 2 generations ago was not a topic at all for researchers. Or how to start up a startup. Just a few examples. The motto of the conference, Research and Innovation Beyond the Information Age, is of course in the center of current discussions. All EU member states are currently working on national artificial intelligence strategies, and they should all be ready by June this year. But reflecting from the policy development and implementation side, I would also slightly challenge the notion of beyond the information age. It is true that we all have to think ahead of long-term perspectives, but also the question is, are we already moving from an information age to a new age? And what kind of new phase are we in? The post-truth age, the post-information age, the machine learning age, the innovation age, the experience age, the sustainability era. Where exactly we will go, it's still open, but it's such a challenging environment, and higher education research organizations and science and research are often quite challenged to provide answers to all the challenges society and politics feel. We can clearly see that dealing with the challenges and the impacts of digitalization is something not just policymakers, but also science and researchers are confronted with on a daily basis, especially when thinking about avoiding a digital divide and giving equal access to the potential benefits stemming from these developments. Within science and research, there are numerous issues related to the digital age. The very essence of research itself is changing due to the advancement of IT. The possibility to collect and work with big data, the potential, but also the challenges related to machine learning, the increasing scale and complexity of modeling, just to name a few. The still changing landscape of research publishing and the new business models connected to it. The increasing ambitions towards open science and open data in order to share knowledge and increase excellence and reproducibility in science and research. And closely related to it, research integrity and ethical issues also connected to artificial intelligence and other technology-driven advancements. I've already touched upon the notion of beyond the information age. This is at the same time challenging and interesting, as it's still open how society and related to it science and research will develop under these new framework conditions, and also in different parts of the world, with different ethical considerations. What is clear, however, is that the demands for researchers are increasing. The demands to have profound knowledge and experience in their own field of research, at the same time to work increasingly inter- and transdisciplinary, to involve citizens in the research process and to co-create and to co-design, to work in international teams, to show a great deal of flexibility and mobility throughout the career, the demand to contribute to the societal challenges towards reaching the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and the demand to make their work available and understandable, not only to the scientific community, but even more important to society at large, because in the end, it's the taxpayers who will provide the funding for science and research. To meet these demands, researchers have to fulfill education and continuous professional development. And of course, this is also where Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions come in. They provide, although in a very competitive setting, the possibility for excellent researchers to advance their skills and their careers throughout international mobility. The European Commission's proposal for Horizon Europe sees a large degree of continuity within Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. Excellence through mobility and fostering skills in a bottom-up manner, open to all scientific fields, will stay at the heart of the program. During the Austrian presidency of the Council of the European Union in the second half of last year, we have succeeded in reaching a partial general approach for the regulation of Horizon Europe amongst the member states. In less technical terms, this means that at that time, and still 28 member states have agreed on a political level where the program will go to. The text of the agreement also includes the general outlines for Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, specifying the envisaged broad lines of activities and intervention areas. At the Council on November 30th last year, we also adopted Council conclusions on the governance of the European research area. Within these conclusions, the importance of developing a European labor market for researchers, as well as attention being paid to young researchers, were stressed in the Council conclusions. Moreover, the Council has also asked for better synergies between the European research area and the European higher education area, related not only to higher education, but also to training and research careers. Negotiations for the Horizon Europe program are now going on during the Romanian presidency, and as all of you will be aware, due to the European Parliament elections in May, it's only a short period of time left for the Council, the European Commission, and the European Parliament to come to a political agreement on Horizon Europe. To what extent the support which is there on the political level will actually also translate into an adequate budget is still open. You all know the oversubscription has been a challenge and is a challenge for the program. But the budget is not negotiated within the discussion of the program, but it's part of a discussion of the multi-annual financial framework, and this will only come after the content has been agreed. So with the elements of Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions post 2020 in preparation, it is important to see improvements and which improvements can be made in the implementation of the program. And this is actually where all of you come in. And this was also at the heart of our presidency conference to already prepare the next phase of the program in Horizon Europe. As all of you, having participated or participating in Marie Skłodowska-Curie action, you know where the strengths and the weaknesses are. Not so much with the program, but also with universities, research organizations, national administrations, framework conditions for researchers. And this is very important because all member states are working in implementing the European research area, and conditions and careers for researchers are a very important element. So it's both, it's the European research area being developed, and it's Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions within Horizon 2020 and then Horizon Europe that should be part of your discussion today. All of you are ambassadors of the program, and your experience is important for policymakers, for the European Commission, and of course also for colleagues to follow you. Therefore, I'm very glad, and I would like to thank the organizers for hosting this event and organizing it in Austria. And I'm also very glad that the Austrian chapter is a quite active one, and we are looking forward to cooperating with the chapter in Austria as well. I would also like to thank the Austrian sponsors, the Technical University of Vienna, the Vienna Biocenter, ISD Austria, and Johannes Kepler University Linz for supporting the event. And I wish you all interesting discussions, fruitful exchanges, and hopefully professionally and personally enriching experience, not just within the conference, but also in the social parts of the conference. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for a very nice talk. Actually, I really like the part when you said that it's not only the policymaker, also the researchers and all different stakeholders should start the discussion for what should be next. So thank you once again. May I request Matthew to... Thank you once again. So it is really a great pleasure for me to introduce our keynote speaker, Director General of Education, Youth, Sports and Culture, Themis Christophidou. She's a civil engineer with more than 30 years of experience in private and public sector management. She's an alumna of civil engineering faculty of Mezzogiorno Polytechnic University of Athens. She joined in European Commission in 2001. She held various positions in Director General for regional and urban policy, education, culture, youth and sports, maritime affairs. She also worked as the head of cabinet of the Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Management from 2014 until 2018. As an engineer and as a policymaker, she has a vast experience on really how the policy are making, so we are really excited to hear from you.
Good morning. First of all, let me say that there are many free seats in the front row, so please don't stand at the back. If you want to be more comfortable, you can come and sit here. Feel free to. Thank you, Director General, for your speech. Thank you for the hospitality in Vienna. Thank you to the University of Vienna for the hospitality and for letting us organizing this event in these spectacular premises. I want to thank, of course, Matthew and Mostafa and all the team who has made this gathering come true. And I also want to thank the Erasmus Mundus Alumni Association board and members. Several of you are here today. And I thank them because they were the ones who actually contacted me first to join their General Assembly yesterday. But they had the generosity to say, if you want to come on Monday so that you join us and the colleagues from Marie Curie, it's fine too. So I thank them for that generosity. Matthew said he is a sort of example of mobility because he came to Europe for a year and he's 15 years later, he's still here. And I know very much what he's talking about. I left the most southeast part of the EU, a small island called Cyprus, 25 years ago to come to Brussels for a couple of years, and 25 years later I'm still in Brussels. But in Greek we say nothing is more permanent than the temporary. So I can't tell you how privileged I feel to be here today. This is you're an impressive audience and fabulous people with impressive brains and CVs. So I really feel humbled to be here. Thank you for this. It's very heartwarming to see all these faces of people like you that the European Union has enabled to do what you do best: push the boundaries of knowledge a little further. I'm told there are 40 nationalities here today. This is also something that tells a lot about our programs. And I want to thank you all for giving back through both the Marie Curie Alumni Association and the Erasmus Mundus Association to give back something from what you got out of these programs. Thank you for sharing your experience, for promoting the program, for channeling your energy and creativity into new ideas, and for mentoring others so that they can do the same. Of course, this venue couldn't be more appropriate. The University of Vienna has been home to 15 Nobel Prizes, a totally impressive number. As impressive as a community of thousands of researchers spread around the world, standing together for a common future. A diverse community committed to the European project that continues to break down the stereotypes of the researcher, of the scientist, of the man and woman of letters, locked away in their ivory towers, disconnected from society. Indeed, breaking down the stereotype of the researcher who by default was supposed to be a man. I'm glad to see so many female researchers in this room. You're a community that stands as an example of vigor, working for the common good. And that's why I want to thank you for this service. Being in your presence, young scientists who took advantage of the European Union's freedom of movement and had the drive to know more, to go further, this reminds me of the first words of Odyssey. Sing to me, muse, about the resourceful man who has known the countries and minds of many people. Is it not impressive that Homer still manages to define in so few words practical wisdom for posterity? It is this idea of wisdom that lies at the heart of both the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions and the Erasmus Plus program, a wisdom bound to the experience of the other. You are the embodiment of this. It is because you embody this wisdom that we continue to invest in you. Both the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions and Erasmus Mundus are about a lot more than just the acquisition of knowledge. You seek to take knowledge and apply it, to make the world a better place. This is why you deserve the investment that was placed in you. And it is quite an investment. Since 1994, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions have supported over 120,000 researchers with over 14 billion euros, over 6 of which were invested in the context of Horizon 2020. In addition, the Erasmus Mundus joint master degree programs received 148 million euros just last year. This will result in over 3,000 scholarships for students all over the world between 2019 and 2022 for the 3 years. The international dimension of these programs is essential for the European Union to become the strong global actor it aspires to be. And as far as Europe's place in the world is concerned, one area in the globe should be particularly highlighted today. This is Africa. By 2050, the African population is expected to rise to 2.5 billion, mainly young people, and will account for a quarter of the world's population. At the same time, the African continent is likely to experience significant effects of climate change. Because we do believe here that climate change exists, no? The way in these changes are managed will determine the future of the continent and of the world. This is why we are committed to becoming a true and fair partner to Africa. We want to create opportunities for young Africans because only they can be the engines of socioeconomic development in their region. The President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, promised in September 2018 to increase the number of African students that will benefit from Erasmus Plus mobility to 105,000 in the coming years. In fact, we are already doubling the number of student exchanges in 12 West African countries, with funding from what we call the EU Trust Fund for 2018 and 2019. Our relations with Africa are fundamental to our future and are well worth the effort. In a few years' time, we will be able to enjoy the fruit of a solid partnership, a partnership that is not based on dependency, but on mutual prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, much like our investment in Africa and the world, our investment in you is totally not misplaced. We know research is not easy. It is a high-pressure job requiring the highest degree of dedication. Your sacrifices are not forgotten, which is why we will continue funding these programs in the future European Union budget and are proposing to also increase them compared to now. But this dedication can also become all-consuming. It is easy to forget that there is a wider world out there. So I'm here to ask you to be mindful that you don't fall in that trap. In 3 months from now, European citizens, there are many of you in this room, will elect a new European Parliament. For those of you who are voters within the European continent, the European Union, the first thing I want to do is urge you to go and vote. I'm not remotely trying to tell you what you should vote. Of course, this is your choice, but please just go and vote. Don't delegate your decisions and your future to old people like me. Take your future in your hands. This is the... I'm glad you agree with this, really. So voting is the very least a citizen can do. But you have never been content to do the very least, you in this room. So why would you start now? We need your voice. I talk to you now not only as researchers, but also as citizens. You have the privilege of being some of the brightest, best informed, and most knowledgeable people on the globe. We need you to apply these virtues also to civic life. We need you to be active, to be the active participatory voice that shares your wisdom, the wisdom of those that traveled far and wide and have studied in great depth. We need you to push Europe forward, not just scientifically, but also socially and politically. Europe has certainly made a difference to the lives of every person in this room. European funds have changed the course of your destiny and of your research. Europe has provided the peace and stability that allowed us to grow, both personally and within the many communities to which each of us belongs. This European project has given us the opportunity to thrive because it's based on the common values that bind us together. These values, you know it better than I do. They are respect for human dignity and human rights, freedom, democracy, equality, and the rule of law. Yet, this heritage is clearly in jeopardy today. As great researchers and academics, you have a special responsibility to defend our shared values. It is a duty for all of us to make a difference in combating myths and putting the facts straight. Democracy can very easily disappear unless we are vigilant in guarding it. And there is another mission, one that is specific to your profession, of which I would like to remind us all. How can we fight fake news and disinformation if we don't have reliable, independent, and free thought? How can democracy thrive without critical thinking? So we need you to continue to research and sometimes draw the spotlight on our institutions so that they remain true to their purpose. Defending democracy is as much about sharing its benefits as it is about remembering that it is not immaculate, that people make mistakes, and that we must learn through them instead of seeing that criticism as a threat. Unfortunately, some seem to consider academic freedom to be an obstacle, a reason to defund academia, a reason to divest. I can tell you this, we will not abandon academia, we will not abandon research, and we will not abandon you. Erasmus Plus and the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions will continue to support your work, no matter what your opinion is. We trust you will keep each other true. That is what the research community is about. It is on this intersubjectivity that we must invest. Ladies and gentlemen, you are an inspiration. The European project cannot survive in autopilot. You clearly love the world enough to devote your lives to learning more about it. I hope you also agree that wisdom is about loving the world enough to assume responsibility for it. I thank you for your attention, and I hope I will see you all in a year from now in Croatia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very enlightening talk. I hope every one of us is right now very inspired from your talk, and especially telling us that you will never abandon us. But just to give you one feedback, we have a member and we have a session on post-truth era who is actually trying to develop a software to detect the fake news. So we are working on that. And thank you for your appreciation on our volunteer hours. I think the member of Erasmus Mundus Association and Marie Curie Alumni Association, that's our main motto. We want to give everything back what we achieved from here. Now I hope you will have some time for discussions or questions. So I'd like to ask the board member of Erasmus Mundus and MCAA first, Pavan, or anyone, if you guys have any questions first. Lucia, where are you?
Yeah, we're excited, and thank you first of all, Mostafa, for the opportunity, also Matthew.
Take the micro, please.
Yes. Sorry. It's really nice to be here, and this is the first time where we're also, as Emma, been attending a Marie Curie session, so hopefully this becomes as a joint activity in future. Potentially most of our members are your future members, so this is something which we foresee. And thank you, Themis, for being here, and also Barbara there. And thank you, guys, for this opportunity. And for all the Emma members, please make sure you really network the fellow Marie Curie members here. And we're really looking forward to this cooperation. And I would just like to say thank you so much. And thank you for your patience, especially Mostafa. You've done an amazing job. And without you and without your support, I don't think we would have been here. So I appreciate all this work from Marie Curie and look forward for this next 2 days with you guys. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Pavan and Erasmus Mundus Association. We are really glad that you could join us, and I hope it would be a great event. You have a...
Okay, so I do have a question, and I want to say, of course, this is a fantastic speech, and the message is extremely important for all of us. I guess what I'd like to know, and I think everybody wants to know, is tell us if there's specific things that you think that we can do to engage more with the Commission, with the local governments as well. Especially, as you said, the European elections are coming up, and it's extremely important that our voice is heard. And beyond that election, just what are some of the things that we as researchers can do concretely to help influence policy?
Well, if you first start from a very sort of egocentric point of view, we all need to make sure that we have enough funding for researchers like you and future ones in the future. So There are the European elections, and there's also the bigger discussion on the multi-annual budget of the European Union. The European Union has a 7-year budget, so now the discussion on the post-2020 budget is on the table. You don't need to convince the European Commission, so I just say this so that you don't waste energy on that. We are convinced, but it's important to convince other decision makers. And usually we all make a sort of slightly wrong assumption, because we talk to each other and we talk to the ministries of research and the ministers of education, and so between us we're all convinced, and so we agree that education is very important, that research is very important. So then we're all happy that we've done our job, but that's not where the job should be done, because again, we are preaching to each other and preaching to the converted. The job needs to be done with those that decide on the money, guys. It's all about the money at some point. So this is our local politicians that become members of European Parliament, and this is our ministers of finance. So, you know, you have to make your voice heard. You have to make them, the people who decide on the money, listen to your view on how valuable these programs are for you or not. That's where the real impact will be. The fact that I say it is not good enough, and the fact that you say it to me doesn't change much, because I know. But it needs to go to the ears of those that decide. Barbara wants to continue on this.
Yeah, I think, as you said, usually we speak among the community which will be in agreement with us. And this is also one of the challenges which I mentioned is go out and try to reach the regular citizens, because this is actually where the taxpayers' money comes from, and politicians will be easier convinced to focus funding on areas where they think that their own society, their electorate, will actually be interested in. And that's why it's very important that, and it starts in everyday life. Just to explain what you're doing and why it's important. There are, of course, a lot of activities all across Europe in this respect as well, from children's universities to science slams and the long nights of researchers. And what we see is during these events that there's quite some interest from the public in research, but it's only a few events that take place, and it should be something that's part of your normal life, more or less. Because it's like a stone being thrown in the water. If you have these waves developing, it will be much easier to convince also those in charge of funding to put the money where we all think in this room the money should go to. So I think this is something that every single researcher, every single person in policy development, in higher education and research can work on and could be helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I want to answer my own question, but I do want to contribute one more thing regarding the impact and the influence. One thing I want to say, coming from the United States, I do have to say what's happening there and in other countries politically, everybody considers a crisis, and they are very alarmed, especially from our community. But what is also happening is that people are getting engaged and they're running for office. They're voting, but they're also getting involved and putting themselves up to be the next policymaker, to be the next politician. And me being here, I couldn't do that because I'm not there. But I think for everybody here, think hard about that. Get in touch with the people who are governing. Talk to them about what you can do concretely, whether it's supporting candidates, supporting policy, or run for office. Don't be shy about it. In the last election in the US, a lot of researchers, scientists put themselves forth as candidates and were very successful. And I think this is maybe the most direct way that you can actually influence change.
Can I just add into a bit, if it's fine? The thing is that the European Commission is already have the internship for to work at the European Commission where it's probably a way to get connected with the Commission. There are other organizations who are actually working. There is a topic called science diplomacy. I think Matthew is working on that from our association and myself. So, like, I think the Spanish government already started that. So the researcher, they go to a government institution and do the fellowship for 1 year. So I understand the view, the importance of including the citizen on the day-to-day life issues, but it is also important that the researcher's voice should be heard at the policy level. So my question is actually to Barbara, is the Austrian government has any such initiative? I mean, I know that there are a lot of organizations like FWF, they are really open on open access, they're working a lot, but about the science diplomacy are really hearing from the scientists, if there is any initiative, if you can kindly comment on that.
Well, we do have advisory councils where scientists are included in the board, for instance, in the Austrian Science Board. And actually, the Austrian government is now preparing to set up one strong individual advisory body for the whole government in order to support evidence-based policy in science and research. And this will, of course, include, and especially not national, but also international science and research. And this is already in the development now.
Thank you very much.
So, can I speak? Yeah?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
please. Yeah.
So, good morning. I am the president of the European Platform of Women Scientists. I'm from France, Claudine Herman, and I will speak this afternoon in a session on sexual harassment. The problems that you are pointing now, especially Themis, is we are dealing with a small part of it which concerns gender. And what I would say that through Europe, there are countries like Austria and mine in which it is easy to speak about this kind of topic. And you are heard when you try to speak to politicians. Maybe they are not very efficient, but they hear you. And there are other countries in which it is much more difficult now. So there should be a kind of solidarity among all these alumni to support the ones in countries where things are more difficult.
So, thank you for the feedback. Just to give you one example, we are starting the research, it's a different topic, but we are starting a research ability working group. I think there is a session there, I think today. So this is an example where I think the organization from France is also actually helping us. So this is an example where the Erasmus Mundus, MCAA organization from France are coming together for one topic. So I completely understand your point, and I hope that more and more associations will come together to work on those joint issues. Yeah.
Maybe within the European Union, the ERA roadmaps, the European Research Area roadmaps are also an important instrument, I think. The ministers agreed that there will be regular publication. Actually, the new report was only adopted last week by the European Commission. And gender issues, gender mainstreaming and diversity is one of the elements where you can actually then see for all 28 countries what the development is and where countries are making progress or not making progress. But that's only for, of course, for the 28. But it's peer pressure, and it helps definitely to have it in a transparent and open way being made public once a year. And there will be, as of next year, there's the idea to have ministerial conferences on the development of the European research area. The Croatian and German EU presidencies are working on that. So this will also be an important voice, I think, to show in which parts of Europe maybe the development is not going in the right direction.
I may add a point on women in science and girls in STEM more generally. It seems that in Europe we're not doing well, but even worldwide there's a big problem. In last September, I was in the first G20 Education Minister Summit, and it was on top of the agenda the lack of girls in STEM, and being myself, coming from a small country, from a quite traditional society at the time, and 4 decades ago, having gone to study engineering, the fact that today we're still discussing about women in science and girls in STEM, I feel is a big failure of our societies, and we need to do a lot more about it. Of course, there's a lot of discussion to make to have on stereotypes. The Commission is doing a lot to try to promote STEM. I'm working a lot on the Erasmus program to put more emphasis in these subjects in terms of secondary school and even primary school, because you have to start very early on. But it's, the issue is something on everybody's radar. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia, you had one.
Yes. So my question goes to Themis, and I'd like to ask how the Commission can support and help researchers in countries where academic freedom is at high risk, and like certain research topics are even being restricted, regardless of the fact if they are being supported by the Commission. Thanks.
Regardless of the fact?
That they are being funded by the Commission.
Well, if you're talking about the European Union member states, then we're discussing about issues that go well beyond MSCA and Erasmus programs, of course. So you know that there are issues with the rule of law between some member states and the European Commission, and there is a bigger discussion which is not a pleasant one, and it's a very disappointing one. So the European Commission is holding very, very high the fundamental values, and so it will not give in on these values. We are in constant dialogue and sometimes even, I would say, confrontation with the member states on these issues. And you read a lot about it in the press, so I don't have to now go into details. But it is very, very high on our agenda, and we're not going to just pretend it's not happening.
I think Karen had a question. So. Okay. Mohammed, can you please?
Yeah, I have a question from the Mrs. General Directive. I want to ask you about, as going back to the theme of the conference, the research and innovation beyond the information age. I want to ask you that as we move out from the information age and into a new conceptual age, what can we do to stand out? More specifically, how can we combine unrelated ideas from different spheres into a new, completely new innovation?
God, this is a question from me to you guys. I mean, these are very complex, PhD discussions. So who has an answer to this? Lady.
We are working on that, I guess.
Okay, that's a short, good answer. Yeah.
I don't have an answer to that. But my question is, given the dire need for civic and political advocacy and communication, what are the support systems for scientists and researchers to transition into a professional advocacy and communication role such that they can help the research environment? And furthermore, given the higher competition these days of being able to do the traditional academic track, it would be highly beneficial if there is support for researchers to seek this alternative route and collaborate with professional researchers. Thank you.
Well, we have European programs. For example, I'm thinking of the EIT, which is a program that is addressing the triangle between education, research, and business world. So we have programs like this, which are there to make the bridge between your research stage of life and the transition to business. I don't know if you're aware of this program, European Institute for Technology and Innovation in Budapest, EIT. So if you want, if you send me an email, I will send you more information about it.
Thank you. I can just add a bit. There is a session on career paths for researcher, which is organized by Gabor. You might get a lot of your answers in that session. It's today starting from 2 o'clock. I think Karen had a question. Karen, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. No, I just wanted to pick up on the diversity issue and gender issue that you kind of mentioned on getting more girls involved in STEM, because I think there are just several dimensions to this issue. One is getting girls involved, but also getting them to stay. Because, for example, there was a big report in the UK, Breaking the Barriers, on retention of women in chemistry. And whereas 44% of women start at undergrad level, only 9% are left at the point of professorship. So I'm sure there will be sessions covering some of those topics, but I think it's also important to think about the culture of research and how we keep women there. And this actually also touches on different careers. I think if we would recognize a broader range of activities in academia, we would solve a lot of different problems. And I was just wondering whether you have any comments on the issue of the culture and how we can solve maybe a different issues with addressing the core problem of what is recognized and what is rewarded in academia at the moment.
On the girls and science and staying and so on, I think it's part of this bigger discussion and bigger issue of stereotypes still being in society. So if you pay women, female scientists less than male scientists or researchers, then of course you create already this problem. My belief is that we have to start very early on. That's why I'm trying to work with the Erasmus program more with teachers for basic education at school level, because these are issues that you have to address at a very young age. Again, with this program that I mentioned, the EIT, the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, we have specific targets and programs for female scientists and researchers in order to try to encourage this. But it cannot end at a specific program. This is a much bigger issue, and the fact that we are discussing it and that you are here in these numbers is very encouraging. But again, any input on this is appreciated. So if you have ideas of how to address it further, I would be happy to receive your input.
Maybe just, I think you touched on a very important issue regarding the recruitment procedures, especially at universities, and also the question on funding agencies' selection criteria, because we all know that there's a certain mainstreaming, and the higher the competition, it was mentioned before, the higher the competition gets, the more mainstreaming we see in what is funded. And it's a discussion that's already also ongoing in Science Europe to look on including additional criteria in the selection procedure, because if you want researchers to be able to also communicate, you also need to include that in the set of criteria. And especially for the recruitment procedures, we know from Austrian universities, they have started looking also in these additional skills among the professorships, because otherwise, if you only look at the excellence criteria regarding publication and indexes, you will not be able to come up with this kind of diversity you really want to achieve. But it's an ongoing process, and of course it's quite challenging, and we see that also that in some fields there are only a certain number of female professors available, and they of course get the best offers from across the world, and there's a lot of pressure on them then to be in all the committees. So this is also something policymakers need to think. It's important that we have the quota in all the committees, but at the same time, the pressure on women being successful gets even higher, because then they have to be represented in all these different committees on top of their excellent research. So it's It's a culture change, but I think it is ongoing, and there is always the pendulum going back and forth. So it's very important that the young generation is also really drawing the attention to it all the time.
So I think we can take only one last question due to the time. Okay, Hossam.
Okay. As I am a chair of African chapter, I am glad to hear about the increasing of Marie Curie Fellowship and the European Commission Fund for the African youth. So I am glad for this. So we expect more members in African chapter in a few years. But I can highlight something. We face a big problem or disappointment problem when we return back to our countries. We face that not enough resources to can do research and something like that. Do we think about have joint fellowship with the African universities to develop their infrastructure and the resources for when we return back as African members to can find ground to work on? Okay.
The issue of return and, if you like, of brain drain is a big discussion, and inside the EU also the discussion is taking place. There are countries like what we call the new member states that say, well, all these programs are wonderful, but they're wonderful for our researchers who then disappear, and we never have the benefit of their wisdom again. So this is a big issue, and we're trying to see how we will address the return problem. Now, for Africa, I totally see what your point, that it's an even bigger issue. That's why the European Union Action for Africa will not just be about Erasmus and Marie Curie. It will be a bigger development plan. Some people call it a new Marshall Plan, if you like, just to make the parallel in the political terms. So a bigger development plan on how to work with Africa to support the development of Africa in a sustainable way, so that when you return, the infrastructure and the know-how and the capacity is there to receive the returnees.
Thank you very much. With this, I'd like to thank you all.
Sorry, can I have just a final question, as I was waiting for quite a long time? Just 3 minutes. To Themis, as I'm part of the Marie Curie Alumni Association in the UK. I was wondering, with Brexit looming, can you just tell me some very practical information on how the cooperation with the UK will develop, as this is going to influence many of us and our careers? We would really like to know something practical. So sorry for bulging in, but I think this is important for our future.
I couldn't believe my luck that it will finish without the B word, but there we are.
This is the no Brexit zone.
Yes. Of course, you are absolutely right to want an answer to this question. Now, there is an official answer that I'm supposed to give you, and then I can give you a sort of my personal answer. The official answer is our political leaders on both sides of the channel, in their wisdom, will make the final decision, and on that final decision, everything will depend. So that's the official answer. It tells you nothing. Okay. Now, my answer, the problem with this is that I'm told it's broadcasted, so I hope it's not a couple of million people watching this at this point. At this point in time, I hope they've all switched off, so I'm not totally grilled. We are working, of course, on a lot of what we call contingency plans, because we don't want to have people, stranded on the 29th of March and not knowing, what's happening with me now. But for the moment, there's no clarity. There's no clarity because there are two issues. One is an issue of legal basis, if you want, of legal framework, and one is an issue of funding. So we will have to clarify with the UK, with the authorities, with the government, whether they will want to continue working with the EU on mobility programs. Therefore, that's what I call the legal framework. And then there will be the question of to cover the funding of this. I'm receiving a lot of rectors from the UK universities very regularly, also on Erasmus+, because you can imagine that the discussion on Erasmus is a very similar one. And they often say, yes, but our government says that they will cover the costs after Brexit. The cost is one thing, but the framework is another, because whether the UK will have a relationship with the EU, which will be one of closeness, enough closeness to continue working on these programs as before, or whether it will have a relationship which will be putting the UK in a group of countries that are very remote to the EU, will make a big difference. So it's a long answer to still not give you an answer, but I wish I had one. We all want to continue working together in terms of education, university mobility, academia mobility, and so on. That's one thing that is for clear. All member states want to continue. The UK wants to continue. So this is maybe the only solid basis. But how this can be achieved, and if it can be achieved, and at what stage the answer will be clear, is very unclear. I mean, you're reading the news as much as I do. Things not every day, but every hour, they're very fluid at the moment. So we are trying to have, as I say, contingency plans for the people not to be stranded somewhere in a vacuum on the 29th of March. Barbara.
Yeah, maybe just a short additional note. We had the Council Competitiveness Research last week on Tuesday, and the minister, the UK Minister of State for Universities and Science, promised all his colleagues a letter of information where the UK government, and this is the funding part, is dedicated to continue funding for Horizon 2020, which will also include, of course, Marie Skłodowska-Curie. So we are now all waiting for this letter. And at the same time, all the EU member states, the remaining EU member states, are already working on national legislation regarding the contingency plans, because, of course, a lot of it is related then to residency permits for UK citizens, and at the same time for our own nationals being in the UK to provide adequate funding opportunities. And this is ongoing in all the national parliaments for the time being.
So thank you very much, everyone, and we would really... I know you have a lot of other questions, but the Director General actually needs to leave, so we'd like to thank you for your time, and you came to this event. So we really hope to see you in Croatia, and with this I would like to thank all the speakers of the opening ceremony. Please don't leave, we have some announcement for the logistic purpose, so thank you very much. So very quickly I'd go through with the session overview. We have, just after that, there will be lunch. It would be the first floor, where is the exhibitor area. So there are all the posters and exhibitors. Please talk with the exhibitors. And then after that, there will be a coffee break, which is also would be on the first floor after the first parallel session and the second session. So remember, we have 5 session rooms, Audimax, which is this one, Big Horschel, Horschel 31, 32, and 33. So 3 of them are at first floor. And then we also have a web app. If you haven't registered yet, please register there. It's Chatbird. Also, in a lot of sessions, there will be the interactive questions and answers. So use the Slido. You will have all the information at your badge if it's already printed. And also the social media hashtag for the event is MCAA Conf 19. Please tweet us, tag us. And then the digital poster presentation would be tomorrow, I think, from 1:30. And remember, there is also a Best Poster Award, both for digital and hard copy. We will open the voting very soon, I think tonight. So don't forget to vote. And I would really like to thank all the sponsors, our gold sponsors, silver partners, Technical University, Wiki Academy, Vienna Biocenter, Vienna Convention Bureau, Job.ac, Kazi, Kepler University, Research in Germany, Austrian Business Agency, Cost Action, Euraxis, Net for Mobility, and of course our funding organization, MSCA, Euroscience, Science Career from AAAS, and also Austria, my Austrian Airlines, and Startup Live. And very special thanks to the Erasmus Mundus Association member for joining us. Last but not the least, we have a science comedy show on 25th of February. Please register, join. And whoever registered for the dinner tonight, take your ticket. After 2:30, if there is any ticket left, we would be distributing that. So there are few tickets left. If you want, please go there and talk at the registration desk. Thank you very much. I hope you will have a very nice and fruitful conference.
Oh my gosh.